Hello and welcome to the Berkcast, the How to Train Dragon podcast. I'm your host HC, and with me are
Rush 2112
and Wolf.
And welcome back from one episode ago. Haddock, how are you doing?
Hello, it's great to be back again and so soon. So, hello again.
Yep, but today we haven't brought you in order to talk with us. We brought her to ask you questions. So, guys, put on interrogation mode. We are going to interrogate her about the location of all her book knowledge, because I need it.
Uh-oh.
Who are you? Where have you put the Dragon Riders? Oh, wait, sorry. Wrong interrogation mode.
I look forward to being interrogated, although I'm slightly scared about what these questions are going to be now since you're going into interrogation mode.
I sent you them last week.
Don't worry.
I know, I'm joking, but I'm like, are there going to be surprises now?
What did
there
you
might
say,
be
Rush?
one or two.
I said
Oh,
this
this will
isn't
be
Spider-Man Homecoming, that interrogation mode.
You know what? I didn't think about it, but you know what? Yeah, let me get the voice adjuster on.
What do you know about Vulture?
Give me names or else.
Yeah. What? That's not your voice.
Yeah, great moment, great movie. Anyway, so before we start the interview, Haddock, to those who are new to your blog and what you do, explain to us what is it that you do. What's your blog about?
All right, so I am Kingofthewilderwest on Tumblr, so that is kingofthewilderwest.tumblr.com. And what I primarily do on this blog is I analyze How to Train Your Dragon. Anything within the franchise, both for DreamWorks and for the Cressida Cowell novels, basically anything that is How to Train Your Dragon, I will talk about. And while there are some times where I will post my own thoughts that come to mind, generally the way that I go through with analyses is that people send me in questions and prompts by which to analyze the topic. And so people will ask me something and I will respond with the best analysis I can do. Typically, the way that I like to analyze things within How to Train Your Dragon is through an in-world perspective as versus a production perspective. So I like to look at all the material across the franchise and piece it together coherently to make a good understanding of what happens in-universe. I don't tend to talk too much about the production aspects or what goes into the creation process, although I do talk about that too from time to time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first question of the day, what got you into the How to Train Dragon community?
That's sort of an entertaining story because it happened entirely accidentally. I never actually participated in fandoms prior to the How to Train Your Dragon community either. I lived a very fandom-filled life growing up because I always interacted with my friends, who all of us happened to be very nerdy individuals. But I never did much participation or seeking online for fandom materials. And even going into Tumblr, it wasn't with the intention of going into fandom either. All of my friends were cosplayers who were making cosplay blogs on places like Facebook and Tumblr, and even though I am not as good of a cosplayer as them, I decided that I would follow the trend and make a cosplay blog on Tumblr. That is how I first got exposed to the How to Train Your Dragon community. And because the first cosplay that I was planning was Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon 2, in anticipation of the upcoming second movie, I started doing some posts about my costume and started doing posts about How to Train Your Dragon and reblogging things from How to Train Your Dragon. After the movie came out, I got so excited that I started screaming about How to Train Your Dragon, and that is how I started slipping into the community.
Interesting.
I'm very much in a similar boat myself, where I didn't have a lot of interaction with fandom online or in general until How to Train Your Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So How to Train Your Dragon was your first online community as well?
Mm-hmm.
Nice, nice.
My first
So I
was
wasn't the only person.
Yeah, pretty much. You know what? My first friendly online community, which focused on one franchise and not because the online community I was on before How to Train Your Dragon was pretty much gaming in general, not just one franchise. So
you don't build a community.
Okay, so interesting. Rush, next question is yours.
So you said you created the blog really before you came into How to Train Your Dragon, or can you give us an idea of when or how you got the idea to create a blog about just the franchise in general? When did you determine to make it just a How to Train Your Dragon blog?
So what happened was, I joined Tumblr in 2014, May 2014. So just a little bit before How to Train Your Dragon 2 came out. And again, this was an accidental decision to become a How to Train Your Dragon focused blog. After How to Train Your Dragon 2, I wrote several long analyses. The first was comparing a spoiler event from How to Train Your Dragon Book 11 with Stoic's death in How to Train Your Dragon 2. And then I started talking about the How to Train Your Dragon score from a music composition standpoint, and I just wrote several of these very long analyses on my own because I wanted to get my thoughts out. And I got noticed, and they got quite a few notes. Actually, they're still some of my analyses with the most notes. And because I got so many notes, I got happy because I was a new blog, and so I just decided to keep on giving people what they apparently wanted. So I kept on coming up with new How to Train Your Dragon 2 topics to analyze. Suddenly, people started asking me questions, I started interacting with fans, I became friends with people, and at that point in time, I started reflecting and thinking, you know what? This is not a cosplay blog. My URL is very inaccurate. So I changed my URL to Kingofthewilderwest to reflect the fact that my blog was basically already a How to Train Your Dragon analysis blog. I stumbled into it.
And now we are a millionaire.
Yes, and so now I stumbled into it within a few months, and I got plopped into that role, and I rode with it.
I just want to say our most popular post is one that I did of my dog doing the How to Train Your Dragon hand thing, and he walks into it. That's a heart feels bad for us.
Walk right into it. Yep.
We'll get there.
Yeah. If I may just say something with Home of One, recently someone asked you what will be each character's favorite movie from How to Train Your Dragon. That was interesting. That some of the choices were interesting about that. So, yeah.
Thanks. That was actually a hard question for me. Sometimes I think it's obvious what my hard questions are, but hopefully all of them sound convincing enough.
Well, you got me on that. You got me too, actually. Believe it.
All right, good. Yeah, I always want to make sure that I'm not BSing an answer. I always want to make sure that it has good thought behind it. Yeah.
Unless you're trying to do an April Fool's blog, then...
I've never done an April Fool's for How to Train Your Dragon. Don't tempt me.
Yeah, I did an April Fool's episode of the Berkcast, and some people wanted to kill me, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to find this.
Yeah, so I won't. Just go into the Berkcast YouTube and go. You'll find it. You'll know what it is.
We already know what our next one will be. Don't worry.
Good.
We all know what the next one will be. Anyway, but before we get to this, Wolf, next question is yours.
Piggybacking off of Rush's question, I like to throw this one in because even if it doesn't interest anyone else, it interests me. So the name for your blog, Kingofthewilderwest, why choose that? Like, I know, having read the books, where that comes from. So why choose that name?
So
and were there any other names before? Were there any other name choices as well, if you can remember them?
That was my number one name choice that I wanted. When I decided to change my URL to a How to Train Your Dragon name, that was the number one name that I wanted, and I wanted it badly. The reason was, so for people who aren't as familiar with the books, Kingofthewilderwest is the title that Hiccup is trying to achieve through the book series. He's not becoming a chief, it's about Hiccup becoming a king. And so for me, I found it so exciting and interesting to think of a Tumblr URL where it's literally the title that Hiccup achieves. I couldn't think of anything else that would be cooler than that, in my opinion. And honestly, when I tried to change my URL, I was expecting that someone would have taken it. And I was very shocked, to my surprise, and very happy surprise, that I was the first person to come up with this idea.
The name you're trying to make for yourself is taken. Would you like Kingofthewilderwest 1?
Oh, yeah, when I created this Tumblr, somebody had already taken Berkcast. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's why we're Berkcast team. I wonder if we've had any people actually just follow Berkcast, not Berkcast team, on accident. Given we only have about 200 followers, but
when I tried to find Berkcast, I found that Berkcast instead of the Berkcast team one first. So
exactly, yeah. I'm just like,
yep.
Why do they have who has Berkcast and why?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That's the problem with URLs, is they get taken fast.
Yep.
Well,
and you know what? Speaking of which, just a funny story actually. When Wolf brought up the idea to bring you on for the books episode, I saw like Kingofthewilderwest, and I thought, well, I think the name kind of indicates that it's a boy behind that account. And then when we had you on Skype, I'm like, oh, so is it a girl? Is it a boy? I don't know. Like, ask Wolf. I was very uncertain.
I did not know either. I said, might be, might not be. I've not talked with them enough to know for certain.
Yeah, but again, just a funny thing I thought about bringing up. No, nothing intended at all.
No, actually, I find that entertaining, and because I actually do call myself non-binary, so it's always very fun to see what people expect me to be as versus what they actually meet me to be once they see photographs of me or hear my voice. I've noticed that there tends to be a little bit of a disconnect, perhaps because I go by Haddock, he, his, him, and then Kingofthewilderwest on Tumblr.
Okay. Your internet persona doesn't have to be your real persona.
That's very true. We probably shouldn't go into how different the internet persona is from the real persona, but there's a little bit of a persona there.
My biggest question is, why is it not Kingofthewilderwest?
I think it sounds weird. Better pronouncing it Wilder.
No, it
Wilder sounds better.
Does. It absolutely does. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. When I first saw the blog and read the name, I used to pronounce it Wilder, not thinking.
I think
just not looking at the word.
I think we actually had some behind-the-scenes chat, like after a stream about that. It's like Wilderwest. It's like, oh yeah, okay. Anyway.
I think the way that it's written in the book series is Wilder. But for me, it just always sounded better in my head as Wilderwest. And especially since it is that compound that it's written that way, I did a little bit of some vowel tweaking, a little bit of
after the awesome quote-unquote translators over here changed Big Boobie Bertha to Mega Boobie Bertha, I want them to translate a few books just to tell you how that was translated.
Yeah.
Mega. Oh my god. I didn't even know that. You haven't told me that HC's Tales from Outside America yet.
Yeah, because it was last episode. You weren't on the last episode, but you said you listened to it. Did you?
I got to about 20 minutes through because it was when my iPad died power when I was watching it. It's like,
and so I think on that mark we haven't talked about it yet. So it's later in the episode where I mentioned it because I found it so funny. I had to bring it up. It was Anyway, so next question.
Back to the blog.
So, yeah, back to the interview. So, Haddock, was there a post you wrote which was special to you in some way, like in terms of its topic, the reception it got, the points you brought up? Is there a post that you're really fond of?
I think there's this special collection in the back of my head of the posts that I love the most. And I can't talk about all of them, but yes, there certainly are a few that I consider special. Lots of the times they do tend to get good reception, perhaps because I spent so much time and love with them, and because maybe they had a bit more of an original idea than some of the other posts. But for me, I would say, okay, let's give a few examples. So one of the posts that lots of them are early topics because I wrote about them with all of my passion and because they're the ones that started the blog. You have to look at those with a little bit of happy specialness since that's the beginning point and it was
I get it.
Yeah. So one of them was what How to Train Your Dragon says about friendship. That one's about 3 years old, but it's one I don't forget because it's a theme that I think is so important. Talking about both the books and the DreamWorks franchise about how it depicts friendship and why it's so meaningful to us as viewers with the lessons that we learn about friendship through it. So that's one of them. Another one that I like to I remember enjoying a lot was, it was such a weird little detail, is I noticed that wearing or not wearing a helmet in How to Train Your Dragon, in the How to Train Your Dragon films, suggests vulnerability versus strength. Usually I'm not somebody who likes to dive off the deep end into theories that don't have much support. I like to stay very grounded in evidence that's very reasonable. But with this, the idea of a head being covered or not covered is a very innate human gesture. And so the fact that it got translated into the film in some sort of subconscious manner is something that I felt was relevant enough to bring up. So I loved that because there's very interesting parallels of Hiccup taking off his helmet and throwing it aside in critical moments. So Hiccup throwing off the helmet before he tries to train Hook Fang in the kill ring, or Hiccup throwing off the helmet before he tries to do diplomatic negotiations with Drago. So that was another one. Last one I'll bring up, I won't go through my whole list, is I enjoy talking about music because I did get a degree in music composition. And music analyses tend to take a very long time to write. So usually I don't like receiving music analyses prompts just because I will have to spend so much time in them. But one of my favorite posts was I analyzed the music composition structure of Dragon Racing. And that was so exciting for me because that piece is extraordinarily well written. So it was exciting to bring in my music composition degree and explain what I found so extraordinary about the piece to help people understand that this isn't regular soundtrack music. It's a huge, huge step above what we typically receive in film.
Interesting. I'll have to look it up.
Yes, thanks. I'm very good at finding the links to my old posts. So if you want me to toss you a link after this, that would be very easy.
I would very much appreciate the music ones.
Thank you. It's very fun to talk about.
I'll have something to read in class tomorrow. Yay!
Shouldn't you be paying attention?
No, they just show us a movie which will most likely be boring, so I'll use that.
Fair enough.
Glad I can be more entertaining than the boring movie.
Mm-hmm.
The film student. Movies are boring. Don't watch them.
Well, the specific ones they bring us are boring most of the time.
Student. Computers are boring. Just kidding.
Yeah.
No, they are. Absolutely are.
I will find you and I will kill you.
I'll say nice and innocently and not give my opinion.
That's all right.
Good idea.
I wouldn't kill you. You're a guest.
I feel so encouraged with that. I'll get interrogated but not killed. Okay. I know my boundaries of safety here.
Yeah.
You're small.
Just
They'll think you're sick or insane, or go after the more casterly-like ones. Anyway, on the other hand, with where we were talking about your favorite or your most liked post, are there any that you really didn't like to write, or you may wanted to have changed? Something that you either didn't get well received, I would say, or you look back on it and say, well, I may have analyzed this wrong?
There's a few analyses where I've changed my opinion over time. When Gift of the Night Fury takes place. It eventually got to the point where I got sort of irritated discussing it, just because everyone has their own opinion and there's enough problems in it that there's no exact one right answer. There are a few analyses I've written that I am extremely...
if I may just point out, it has to be before the show, because in the shows I already know Midlag is a girl. That's the only thing I'll add to that topic.
Yes, that's part of it. There's so many weird little details that you can talk about, down to the presence or absence of the window in Hiccup's room, and I'm not even joking.
Damn, really? You can see a bit of dust on his metal leg,
It's winter, it should be closed. Oh, yeah, stuff like that.
Indeed, yes. So there's that.
Just to make this clear, I'm not saying this to mock anyone. It's like, on the contrary, I love people who can find these little things and actually write almost an essay about them. If anything, I'm envy of you.
It's fun, yeah. Oh, but anyway, back to topic. So there are the posts where I would change my opinion on them, sort of like the Gift of the Night Fury one, where I actually did write a post saying, okay, here's my changed opinion and here's why. In general, most of my analyses, what I do is I write them, I don't edit them, and I don't care if I end up changing my opinion, because usually someone will ask me the same question again. I can reference the last post that I wrote about it and say, but I actually have a more nuanced view now. There's only really 2 big analyses that I just tried to blot from my memory because I was that unhappy with their reception, and yes, there's 2 of those, and I've got the stories for both of them if you want me to confess about what these horrible posts are that I try to erase from existence.
Well, if you're trying to erase them, I'd say only do it one. Give us the worst.
The worst. Oh.
If you feel like it, you don't have to. But
I'm fine. Maybe it will do me some good to admit the fact that I have been intentionally hiding these posts. Okay, so first off,
before you do this, you need to repeat after me. Forgive me, Din the Blanc, Cressida Carl, for I have sinned.
Good Lord.
Forgive me, for I have sinned. Poor Cresta. Okay, yes. So people who followed my blog long enough know that I used to have a comprehensive list of analyses. Tumblr ate that list in an update. And because my analyses are so long, I've never refinished that comprehensive list. But on that comprehensive list, I left out 2 analyses. And if I rewrote that comprehensive list, I would still keep out those 2 analyses. They're both very old, but I don't forget them because it was just it was a bit of chaos on my receiving end. So the single one that was the worst was, it was very embarrassing and frustrating for me at the time. It was back when I was only a blog a few months old. I was just learning how to make gift sets. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what topics were controversial in the How to Train Your Dragon fandom. And I didn't know what was a sensitive topic. So what I did was I accidentally referenced something about a trailer that lots of people hated. So this is what happened. Back in the day, I used to think that Hiccup was sort of flirting with Heather in Heather Report Part 1. So I made a post making a comment about that, and I didn't realize that when Riders of Berk was first airing, Heather Report, they made a trailer that was apparently misrepresentative of the episode, and people said that the trailer tried to set it up as sort of a love triangle, but that ended up not being the case. I had no idea. I never saw the trailer. But a very well-known blog noticed my comment about Hiccup flirting with Heather, and because apparently they had been debating this problem for a very long time, they got very irritated that I suggested that this was the case. And so they intercepted my post, discredited it, and because they were such a large blog, their discrediting of my post circulated the entire fandom. I mean, hundreds of notes getting passed around through the entire fandom about saying why I was a stupid person.
Oh, God.
Which was great. And what made it even worse for me was this blog was somebody who I considered my biggest and most powerful senpai back when I was the little blog. So someone that I respected a whole lot. It was like, oh, this is like the ultimate How to Train Your Dragon blog. They were going, oh, you shouldn't have written that. You're wrong. And
it
so
was official How to HTTYD.
Yep, it was, yeah. So what was so frustrating is because of Tumblr's format, I can't just make one response post and everyone will see it, right? You don't do that. That's not how Tumblr's format works. But because I was so disgruntled, I actually reblogged from several people with my own arguments, trying to explain what was going on. I even contacted the blogger themselves who made the discrediting in a private message about what I meant. I even wrote a 7,000-word essay response about all the plausible ways that you could interpret Heather Report Part 1, because I was so frustrated that I couldn't intercept and explain why I, the OP, made the comment that I did. So that was a whole debacle, and for years afterwards, anybody starts mentioning Heather Report Part 1, and I just go, no, please, no.
I would avoid, I'm pretty sure that's around, episode, 20, maybe even earlier.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
No, I still like the episode now, and for what it's worth, the blogger who responded to me about that ended up being very cool when I presented my perspective, and they're actually somebody that we respect each other a whole lot, and we talk to each other back and forth, so, it all ended up going very well. Don't mean to say that they were being mean to me. It's just, they gave their opinion and their opinion got circulated, mine did not, and I felt like a complete idiot. So, yeah, I would never ever show people that early post because I don't want to go back to that whole chaos.
Respectable and completely understood.
It is
just to point out something, when you said a topic that people are feeling so strongly about and stuff, I said she wrote something about history, didn't she? She wrote something, and I was close.
You were close because I wrote about Hiccup flirting with Heather, which discredits Hickstrid. So
yeah, exactly. So in some way, it was a part of it. Okay.
Yeah, and even the other post that I messed up on greatly was about my opinions of Astrid in Gift of the Night Fury. So again, I learned pretty quickly that you should.
Hey! Just to make this clear, you have not said anything bad about the eggs explode line, right? Because that line is awesome.
I did not do that.
Okay.
I wrote an entire analysis about the eggs exploding and a concept of rebirth and so forth, but. As far as a double entendre, no, I have not done that.
Okay. So go on. What was so bad about that specific post?
About the Gift of the Night Fury one?
Yeah.
Basically, all I did was say I didn't care too much for Astrid's scenes in Gift of the Night Fury. It's mostly because Astrid and I don't emotionally connect. So it's not that she's a bad character, it's just that she's the character I relate to the least. So I sort of mentioned that I didn't really care for those scenes. And actually the same blogger who exploded to me about the Heather Report was the one who responded about the Astrid and Gift of the Night Fury one and pointed out, these scenes expand her character so much. This was the first time that she really became three-dimensional in the franchise. And I understand that. It's just that if I'm going to be honest, I still don't care too much for Astrid scenes in Gift of the Night Fury. It's just because it's for character.
Legit. It's not
Completely
it's nothing
understandable.
to be.
Uh-oh, I'm going to get hate for this now, aren't I?
No, we will for having you on. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, it's opinions that I've shared in some similar ways as well. So if I've not gotten
Yeah.
hate for it on the show yet, I think you'll be fine.
He's only got
Yet.
I don't get hate. I actually don't, so I'm not worried. I never get hate. If anybody gets slightly huffy at me, they just unfollow me. That's about it.
Yeah, that is like that first story you told us about the first post. That's actually, in my opinion, an actually really good story that I think a lot of people really need to listen to and hear, because it sets an example. Like, you know, if you do have a large following on anywhere, whether it be Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere where it might be,
Each person
Be
you
careful
write
with
to
that following.
each person online is still a person beyond the computer screen.
and remember
No.
that, you know, you do have that big following. It's very easy for you to respond to that person not thinking, and, you know, you have that big following. Those followers are going to respond as well. Sometimes not as well as you do. So just,
Yeah.
you know, remember you do have that following and be careful with that. You can very easily end up dogpiling a person not meaning to. And it's a good example people need to learn, I think.
It's a very good example. I think it shows two things. I think, first of all, is it shows that all blogs have their starting point. I know that I'm a larger blog now, but it's good to remember, you know, there was that point in time where I was the small, tiny blog freaking out too. And also, I do think that this experience was very formative in making sure that I didn't do the same thing accidentally to somebody else. Is I know that I am a large blog and that what I say always turns out to be influential in the fandom. So I do have to make sure that I respect other people's opinions. And one thing that I especially try to do is I try to respect and keep opinion diversity going in the fandom. Always make people feel safe and welcome, even when I do politely disagree with their interpretations. Because one of the interesting things about fandom is that we have different interpretations. So it's so important to be able to embrace all the different ideas that people have, as versus be that one blog where I stomp everybody down with my foot about this is my opinion, this is my way, and I'm going to, you know, bludgeon my way with hard force about getting my opinion the dominant one in the fandom. I really, really am very careful about that. And again, not to say that the other person was, you know, bludgeoning their way. They're not. They're a very good person. It's just that it helped me understand how careful you have to be when you have a large follower count about what you say and what the impact can be.
Yep, very true, very true. So, next question.
Talking about all of that, actually, you know, writing an analysis blog on Tumblr, I have to ask, Tumblr, from my experience and from what I've seen, definitely doesn't seem like the place that long, you know, very long, detailed out posts are the norm or are very popular for that matter either. And I have to ask, like, you know, getting to where you are now, did that take a lot of work and cultivating and time? And do you regret any of that? Is there anything, do you regret any of it? Do you enjoy having done all that work and all the analysis and making, you know, and getting to the point now where you can write something and it be very well publicized within the fandom by and large?
So what's interesting is I had a honestly very short time period in Tumblr by which I was unknown. A few months after How to Train Your Dragon 2 was released, I was getting about 100 followers per week. And so even by the time that September had come around, I was already a decently large blog and well-known blog in the fandom. I think it was about 6 months into Tumblr I got 1,000 followers. So that happened very fast, and I didn't have to try at all. It actually is more work sustaining the blog than it was to build it. So I hugely enjoy it, and it's one of those things that I can never escape from. Lots of my closest friends, actually, I met through the How to Train Your Dragon blog. I've met a lot of people from Tumblr in real life, which is really cool. And you almost met me. Yes, it was so close, and I overslept. Not gonna lie, that was part of it, as I overslept.
One day.
One day we will fix that. That would be great. Yeah, so okay, back to topic. It's one of those things I can't ever escape from. The How to Train Your Dragon community has become my community. And I really do care about the people on there. I recognize the people who are participants in the fandom, even if I've never talked to them personally. You know, I've seen them liking my posts or reblogging things or so forth. It really does feel like a home place. So I'm so happy to be there. It's done so many great things for my life. The only thing I regret is how much time it takes away from my life. Analyses take an incredibly long time to write. And there are times,
As someone who has papers to write which are pretty much analysis, yeah, I know. Only I get grades for it. So that's something, I guess.
Yeah, and when my analyses can be, it's not uncommon for me to get hit 2,000 words in an analysis. It's amazing, as you were pointing out earlier, that my long posts on Tumblr get so much reading. I actually sort of break one of the Tumblr laws of keep it short. I intentionally break the law of keep it short, but it's interesting that that ended up working.
Well,
as well as it does for you, absolutely.
We don't keep the podcast short ever. That's kind of course, podcasts are meant to go long.
They are, yeah. You're the right length for a podcast for sure.
Woohoo! We're doing this right.
Woohoo! Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, Wolf, that was your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So next up, recently you started writing blogs about another DreamWorks franchise, Voltron, the Netflix series, which I still haven't watched. So I'll read those once I'll get to the show. Probably in a year for now. But anyway, what inspired you to give it a try and write about other franchises? And what other franchises, not necessarily DreamWorks, would you like to write a blog about?
All right, so it's interesting. The majority of my analyses are How to Train Your Dragon, but I've actually always had some analyses about other topics going through my blog for years. So if you go through Kingofthewilderwest, you'll notice that I have analyzed quite a few different fandoms. Not as common, but I've gone through them. But as you've probably noticed with Voltron, it's a little bit of an exception in that I'm blogging and analyzing it a lot.
Yeah.
Recently. Yes, it's pretty obvious. And that's different because here's the truth. I've actually been fighting the urge to write huge analyses about many other fandoms from How to Train Your Dragon for a long time. It's not that I hate being a How to Train Your Dragon analysis blog, and I'll always analyze How to Train Your Dragon. And yet, you know, sometimes it can be a little bit of a barrier to explore other topics thoroughly. I'm not afraid to talk about other fandoms, and I do it without worry or regret. It's just that I always tactically skew my blog to be about 70%, 80% How to Train Your Dragon at any given time, just to keep the core followership and reputation going. So it means that I've got pent-up thoughts. Actually, about a year ago is when I first finally let loose and said, screw it, I can't just talk about How to Train Your Dragon. It started with Undertale. And what I did to solve that problem was I made a side blog. And so when I screamed about Undertale and then after that Mass Effect, it's all on that side blog for video games. The problem being that that blog is obviously a lot smaller than Kingofthewilderwest, so I, don't have as much bounce back of conversation with those. So when Voltron came around, I just had to start blogging it because it is currently my latest obsession, huge obsession. And since it's more fit to be the topic of my main blog than my side blog, that's where I started posting things. And because Kingofthewilderwest is a bigger blog, some people have picked up the traction, started asking me and indulging me in questions about my latest love. So with the release of Voltron's 4th season, pardon my swearing, but I just decided to say fuck it all with just talking about How to Train Your Dragon, just because I had to talk about what I love so much. So it's been freeing. It's been really fun to scream about other topics. Don't worry, I'll still keep on talking about How to Train Your Dragon a lot. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm just expanding a little bit more.
So, sorry, would you? I noticed you have done. Just thinking about things that are upcoming. Would you ever think about doing like real, like live action, like Stranger Things season 2 is coming up? I believe Miraculous Ladybug season 2 is coming in December, and I've seen you done some of Miraculous Ladybug stuff.
Right. Yes.
Troll Hunters. Would you be doing Troll Hunter season 2 sometime later this year? Apparently.
Okay, so here I'll just give off a list of some of the fandoms that I really am gung ho about right now.
Okay.
So I'm a huge fan of Star Trek, Gravity Falls, The Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, Pacific Rim, Full Metal Alchemist, The Office, the USA version, Star Wars, Undertale, Mass Effect, and have I said Mass Effect? And then, of course, Voltron Legendary Defender. So it's entirely possible for me to talk about things like Miraculous Ladybug because I have been following it. I won't be as good analyzing Ladybug as How to Train Your Dragon because being a good analysis blog means paying attention to small details. And I don't do that usually with lots of shows. I won't do Troll Hunters. I'm not caught up with Troll Hunters. I'm only halfway through season 1. And people aren't going to like me saying this, but it hasn't gripped me. So I probably won't be doing analyses on that. And Stranger Things, I haven't watched it. I've heard good things about it, but I haven't watched it.
I recommend it.
There's also a lot of little things, and if you're not haven't watched it, then season 2 coming up, yeah, it's gonna be.
Stranger Things is a wonderful love letter to shows of a bygone era, the 80s.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful.
They even referenced an 80s commercials trends. That's how 80s this show is.
Wow. Interesting. Well, I was born a little bit after that, so who knows
So was
how
I.
much
Same,
catch on
but-
that. Yeah.
I think I'm the youngest one here. Just saying. Anyway.
Okay, so next question, Rush. This is yours.
Yeah, so regardless of all, beyond the fandom walls of just How to Train Your Dragon, because this can go for any of them. Is there a character you particularly enjoy writing about or doing your analyses? And even though you may enjoy writing about them, is there a separate or same character that you just enjoy the most?
All right. So I'll keep this within How to Train Your Dragon. Especially since, that is the bulk of the asks I get and the bulk of analyses that I do. There are definitely characters and non-character topics that I enjoy talking about and prefer writing about over others. I'm always trying to give equal attention and thoroughness to all topics, as much as they can be analyzed. But yes, I think people have picked up that there are certain things that I love to talk about, especially. So I tend to get more excited for characters if it's about Snotlout, Hiccup the Second, Book Fishlegs, Book Hiccup, the Thorsten twins, and usually Heather. And there's also a trend where I get freakishly excited about the latest villain of the franchise. Villain Valka was the first where I had to just scream out, and I still adore talking about her. I was in a huge Viggo mood when he came out, and people probably have recently seen me enthusiastically screaming about Traitor Johann's reveal. I mean, my villain excitement has even gone into the comic books with Kror from The Stowaway. Most people probably have not read those, but I got very excited about him too.
I would love to see you write a blog about, I forgot his name, the villain from the Serpent's Cell.
Oh, I haven't done that yet. That's a good point.
Calder, was it?
Yeah, Calder.
Calder.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't talked about Calder. Interesting.
I'm surprised I remember that.
Yeah. So those tend to be the characters that I tend to get the most excited about. And lots of them do tend to be favorites. Not always, but often. Snotlout is my favorite character in the DreamWorks Dragons franchise, and I do have a very special spot in my heart for Roughnut and Toughnut. And yeah, so all these characters are some of my favorites, actually, now that I think about it. Maybe not always villains,
I think I can see the answer to a future to one of our future questions, but
real quick though, I do have to say I completely understand the Snotlout and agree with that, because I just really love what the show has done for his character development. It's been so good.
Oh yeah,
It's been so amazing.
So good. And if you think about what we would not have had for Snotlout if the show hadn't been written, we would have very little Snotlout.
Oh, absolutely.
And yet he's been expanded into something just so beautiful and wonderful and interesting and lovable, full of flaws and strengths. Absolutely enjoyable, and thankful for his character development through the television series.
Now, if they only got Jonah Hill for the show as well, but hey, the guy from the show is doing a great job as well.
One of my absolute favorite lines from the show, and I've continued to say this, it's not the leg, it's everything that's attached to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry. That's...
It's okay. It's the How to Train a Dragon podcast. What we do is fangasm about How to Train a Dragon.
As long as you keep the screaming to text and not actual hurting our ears, I did that once.
I still go to the doctor because of you, just to let you know.
Okay. Well, if you have a question, I think.
Yes,
okay.
A question I think a lot of people love to ask, but I don't think anyone loves to answer. How to Train Your Dragon 1 or 2?
Okay. I do get this answer a little bit, so I am prepared to answer this one. So the answer, How to Train Your Dragon 2.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I got some people happy. Good.
You almost were my favorite guest, and then you just ruined it.
Uh-oh. So here's the reasoning behind it. If this helps, here's the reasoning. Is the first movie, I believe, is the best structure for storytelling. And I'm someone who absolutely adores beautiful storytelling scaffolding. For me, that's one of the signs of a very well-written story, and it's one of the things that gets me most intrigued about a story. But the thing with How to Train Your Dragon 2 is that it was the exact emotional movie that I needed at that time in my life. Mm-hmm. I can't begin to explain how important it was for me to see a main character on screen go through something devastating, cry his heart out, and not completely heal by the end of the movie. That was critical to me, because the last animated movie I'd seen in theaters had the main character's depression and psychological issues just disappear in the end, which for me was uncomfortable and in some ways offensive as someone who was going through a hard time. Yes.
Was it Inside Out?
No, it was not Inside Out.
Inside Out was fantastic. Just to.
No, I could say what the movie was,
no,
although
you can keep.
Yeah. I try not to.
Behind the scenes.
Yes, I spew hate about that movie quite a bit to my IRL friends. Not so much online, because that would be a bad idea. But yes, anyway, so that's what How to Train Your Dragon 2 is about. It was something that resonated so deeply inside of me that it's also what got me into the fandom. So both movies are positively brilliant, and I prefer each of them in different ways. I do say How to Train Your Dragon 2, not because it's a better story, but just because of how much it touched my soul.
Absolutely understandable answer.
Now I definitely agree with your favorite. Come on, after that explanation.
No, sorry, the first movie will always be my favorite.
I know.
There's
not a wrong answer. Both of them are good.
Yeah.
In different ways. Yep.
Yeah, it's absolutely. At the end of the day, both of them are freaking fantastic, and it really shouldn't matter, but you know.
Absolutely.
Okay, you know what, Rash, take the next question, because I want to ask the last one. I want to build it up.
Well,
Makes sense.
Yeah, so we had your favorite movie, now your favorite season or episode, if you have one in specific.
And just to clarify, the reason we didn't ask you for your favorite book is because you already answered it in the previous episode. It's book 11, if I remember correctly. So
Correct? Yes,
No-
I love pain
so-
and suffering. That's sort of a theme.
yeah. So yeah, no reason. But so yeah.
Yeah, okay. So favorite season or favorite episode? Okay, I can actually do both.
Yeah, you're
So I am one of the rare people who prefers Writers of Berk over Defenders of Berk.
Yes.
Mostly because it actually has a lot of my favorite episodes in it. It's got a lot of good showcasing of Hiccup and Snotlout's bickering, which for me is always an enormous highlight. Always love their interactions, always get sucked into them. And so for me, my favorite episode, Defiant One. So that's why I got so excited when you said it's not the leg, it's everything attached to it. Because that's such a critical moment in Hiccup and Snotlout's relationship, where you see so much of the reason why there's tension between these two and what the underlying cause is, which ironically is also the same underlying cause of Hiccup and Snotlout's disagreement in the books. So that's really cool. For Race to the Edge, I'd say that my favorite seasons are the first two. And favorite episode, for the longest time I said Reign of Fireworms. I don't know if it's still the case, but it's one of my top favorites for Race to the Edge.
Okay. Haddock, are you ready? It's the toughest question of them all. The question.
Dun.
The question with. Thank you, Sean Connery Toothless. I appreciate it. Anyway, it's a question that can either get you all the love in the world, or that people might hate you forever because of it.
like our last interview with Max.
Yeah. Are you ready?
I am ready.
What is your How to Train Your Dragon OTP?
All right. So,
I love that. All right, like okay, let's crush some hearts. I'm ready.
yep. Okay. Yeah. So the truth is, I actually don't really ship things. In fact,
It's
until last month, I didn't admit to any ships at all. I recently did a ship meme where I sort of tried to open up to that more affectionate shippy side of me. But the truth is, it's very hard for me to get into a shipping mood. And for me, it's because sometimes the shipping culture is very fun for lots of people. So please, by all means, enjoy it. Please enjoy it. But for me, the culture of emphasizing ships downplays the importance of other people in our personal lives. And other people outside of romantic relationships are just so beautifully important. So I get into stories personally that focus on familial and platonic bonds. So that's what actually gets my heart screaming, are the bro TPs and family TPs that are the true emotional essence of my fandom experiences. So I don't ship anybody in How to Train Your Dragon. In the entire franchise, I don't have a single ship.
So let's rephrase that. What's your favorite bro TP then?
My favorite bro TP. All right. That one, that's an easy answer. It's the friendship between Book Fishlegs and Book Hiccup. It's such a special relationship, and it demonstrates a dedication and tenderness of the like that you rarely see so well written and focused on in fiction. So, Hiccup and Fishlegs in the book, absolutely incredible.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, so that's the big one. There's some other relationships that I get excited about too. So Hiccup and Snotlout in the television series, as I already mentioned, and I also get really excited when we talk about how much the Thorstons care for each other too.
Yeah, I do want to add. I mean, this really isn't an analysis episode for us, but I've said this countless times, but and I'm sure you agree that in the television series, Hiccup and Snotlout are always written so well together.
Yes, their interactions, the way that they bounce off each other, I cannot get tired of it. I know there's some people who are like, Hiccup spends so much time with Snotlout in the TV series, and while I understand that criticism, my heart's just always like, yes, you're giving me more Hiccup and Snotlout.
It's one of the things the show does consistently well, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yes.
Just a fun fact kind of thing. Rush probably remembers that. Rush, do you remember the fan fiction episode, the very first one?
The very first one?
The very
yours?
first one.
The one we read yours?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I rember.
Hmm.
It's hard to forget.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. I'm wondering why. Haddock, just to give you like a sort of just to catch you up on this, I wrote like a parody fic of How to Train a Dragon where like basically everyone with the exception of Hiccup goes insane. It's making fun of usual fanfiction tropes that people use in How to Train a Dragon fanfictions, and a cutscene which I had in mind, but I didn't put it into the final story because I couldn't really find the right place for it. Was that at one point Snotlout will admit that he has a crush on Hiccup.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I cut it because I said, you know what, the people are suffering enough.
I appreciate parody fics. I must say that I don't read much fan fiction, but when I see something like that, I tend to be highly entertained. So that
Awesome.
sounds
I'll send you the link. You know what? Do you want the link to the story or to the episode where we read it? Because
How about both?
The episode is hilarious. It's our first time reading it, and no boy.
We got Sean Connery Toothless from it, and
yeah.
That sounds great.
If you also can send me some parody links, because I love to read them too.
Here's the thing: I'm not really aware of parody links. I just have mine.
Yeah.
So
There was one parody that I read. I would never be able to re-find it, but the story was all the characters sitting down and reading the fan fiction of themselves, and it was things like, Hiccup was like, why am I depressed in all of these? And just making fun of the tropes that you see in the fan fiction.
I've heard of that one.
There are a lot of fan fictions like this, actually.
It's similar to the idea of, I think it was Lion King 1.5.
Oh,
yeah,
that's a good movie. Yeah, where they're watching themselves, and yeah, that was great.
Yeah, great movie. Anyway, so Wolf Rush, do we have anything else to ask Haddock? Oh, no. Okay.
No, I
really
threw in my surprise questions, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, the surprise. Wolf,
I
do you
will-
think we can? Do you think we can add any other questions to the interview? No, it looks good to me. Yeah, all of a sudden, you know what?
You know what? Yeah, let's just go off script here. It's like, okay, great.
It was only 2.
I know. It was
And
two.
I mean, I did the same thing with Max. I'm probably going to continue with Icelandic Yon. I'm probably going to continue to do the same thing in the future. I love asking about names because I'm a terribly uncreative person when it comes to naming anything. So I love asking other people who are actually creative with names and have good names.
Can you imagine actually bringing one of the people who work on the show and it's like, okay, so what's the origin of each episode's name?
Well, I can tell you,
You
a lot
jest?
of their names, a lot of their names
But I would
come
definitely
from,
ask.
like parodies of song titles.
I would.
It's a pretty common thing to do across shows.
Absolutely.
Is shows doing that sort of twisting of common phrases. It's fun to see what they come up with. I don't think I would have quite that level of creativity.
Anyway, with all those finished, HC.
You know what? Just kind of one thing to close us off on. Haddock, since you have this blog which gets a lot of notes and a lot of people read it, what tips do you think you can get to bloggers who are at the start of their blogging life? What tips will you give to newcomers?
Wait for us to get out notepads.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Let's see. I mean, of course, part of my experience was hitting it at the right time. But that's actually something that's good for people to note, is that if you want to be a blog that gets a lot of notes and attention, you have to be current. And so blogging about something that's 7 years old will entertain a niche of people, and it's really fun to be with that group of people who enjoys it. But the most attention that you're going to get is with stuff that's just come out. So there's that. There's also something to be said about consistency. So when I first started my analysis blog and was first starting to get momentum, what I did was one blog in the morning during peak hours, and then one blog in the evening during peak hours. So for me, that was about 9 to 10 o'clock a.m. and then 5 to 6 o'clock p.m. The times when people tend to be online a bit more, across various time zones, of course, too. So there was that. Be consistent. Because the more inconsistent you are, suddenly blogging a lot or going a few days without blogging, that really amazingly does a huge difference in terms of number of notes and followers. So there's that. And then, yeah, that's one of the big ones that I noticed, was just to have that consistency. And the producing of original content is obviously something that's going to get a little bit more attention for a blog than someone who does reblogs. Although, of course, being a reblog blog is extraordinarily fun too and has its own perks. For instance, you're not spending several hours writing analyses every day. And then beyond that is also, I think you have to interact. You can't just sit in the corner of Tumblr. You actually have to do some interaction with that fandom community. Get to know people, reblog posts back and forth from each other, talk to each other, take the initiative to say hello in a chat. I enjoy talking to people in the chat. I can't guarantee that I will respond quickly, but it's very fun. And doing that sort of thing will get you on people's radars because they'll know who you are and they'll check out your blog and your content and so forth. So being active in the fandom community does involve, well, getting to know the community.
That's scary, though.
I'll gasp. And then I guess the one last thing that I would say is appearance actually makes a difference. So when I realized that I was going to write very long analyses, which sort of breaks Tumblr's typical write short things, what I did was I actually started doing section headings, and I started adding in pictures, because that sort of visual helps people sustain interest. It's not just this block of text. It makes the post longer, but it also keeps the eye more refreshed. So do that. Appearance helps. And then last, what sort of followers do you want? I knew that I was going to be an analysis blog, and because I was going to write analyses, the people who want to read my posts are going to want to read long materials. So I actually intentionally don't put in read mores. The reason for that is read mores often get broken links over time if someone changes a name or all sorts of problems. I can just give people the entire text and they don't have to click anywhere and they'll just be able to read it. So I don't know if any of those tips help anybody. It really depends on what type of blog you're trying to be. It's going to be hugely different depending on whether you're a fan fiction blog or a art blog or something. There's going to be something.
Podcast blog crumples up paper and throws it away.
Or a podcast blog, yes.
Hey, say what you want. We have a lot of original posts, not for the right reasons most of the time. Sometimes it's just me going, I can't post my anger on Facebook. I have to.
Yeah,
I have to let it out.
My music class.
Rush, you're more than welcome to transcribe the entire podcast to text.
I'll let YouTube's closed caption AI do that. It makes it much more interesting.
Yeah, you know what? Just hit the translate on the spot and see what other controversial topics we can talk about thanks to YouTube.
Dare I ask?
Let's just say that the question about how to turn dragon OTPs kind of came from a discussion Rush and I had about fish legs and meat nug.
in an episode.
Okay.
It was just us two, and we almost ruined our reputation.
Almost.
I'm so entertained, though.
This is why I'm here now.
It was one of my favorite episodes, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely one of the surprises. Anyway, I think before we start going in that direction again, because the door is starting to open up, and I want to lock it as soon as possible. So,
to finish off, is there anything you'd like to ask us? Since we've been asking you all these questions, is there anything you'd like to specifically ask all of us?
So here's the interesting thing about me. I am very bad at coming up with things on the spot. And that's probably the shortest answer that you'll get. About 2 hours from now, you'll probably get a list of about 200 questions. But at this current time,
so you know what?
I'm going to be boring.
Completely understandable.
You know what? Let's because your forte is blogs, and now you need to do a written interview with us, and then it will all come full circle.
Yeah, I've always been wondering how we would do that. Like, you know, those asked, or not like the asked, but like those tagged blogs. It's like things about yourself, and it's like, well, great. Do we like do each a separate one? Do we do like a bullet list? Like 1, 3 dots. That's each of us. And like, how do we wait for that? Either way.
What is your favorite thing to eat for lunch?
Yeah, it's like, well, that's great. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all for this episode of the Berkcast. We hope you enjoyed. If you want to find Haddock, you can find her at. That's where you plug your stuff.
Yes, I'm not on too many social media platforms, so I'll just reiterate what my Tumblr blog is. All lowercase, no dashes or anything. Kingofthewilderwest.tumblr.com. Or as we discussed earlier, kingofthewilderwest.tumblr.com. I don't like pronouncing it that way, but, you know, if it helps you spell it better that way, you can type in King of the Wilder West and you'll find me.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to talk to any of us, you can do this either in the comment section of this YouTube page. You can also find us on Tumblr, where we are known as Berkcast Team. On Twitter, we are Berkcast with capital B, capital C, and all 3 of us are on the Berk from Vine forums. So until next time, I was HC.
I was Rush.
And I've been Wolf.
And I guess I've been Haddock, so bye.
See ya. Take care.
Bye-bye.